We're very pleased to have Avi Lipkin back in studio with us today, and he's got a lot of news. Avi Lipkin, welcome to Prophecy Watchers. Let's talk about what's going on in Israel.
Okay, well, thank you. As you already know, and many of your viewers already know, we are scheduled to have a second election in Israel within 6 months. In other words, we had an election on April the 9th. Now we had a no confidence vote. Netanyahu could not form a coalition of 61 and above, or out of 120. He did not have a majority. And, I've been with you, 27 years by now. So all I can say is that the party is registered and we are in the running. We ran in the elections April 9th. We are already in position. My team, which is growing, is already campaigning, even though I'm here in the United States. And we will be running, God willing, on September the 17th. And there's a lot of information that people who are watching this show need to have.
Right on the top of our stack of books here that Avi's written is one called Israel's Bible Block. And what I'd like for you to do is just review what is the Bible Block Party, the history of it, how did it get founded, what are its goals. Tell us a little about the Knesset and your involvement in it and where you'd like to go from here.
Israel, like many of the European countries, Israel is a proportional democracy. Without getting into American politics, American citizens don't really have many choices, which may be good, because either you're right wing or you're left wing, and that's it. Israel is a much more complex system. Israel has four primary blocks of parties. We have 43 parties running. Actually, only about 10 or 11 get in, and you need 145,000 votes to get in with your first 4 members of Knesset, meaning about 35,000 votes per member of Knesset.
Now, should you be inducted into the Knesset,
right?
What happens, and what would you like to see happen?
Okay, there are 2 stages to the party. Stage number 1 is that the Christians in Israel, in other words, those who are not considered Jewish by the rabbinate, are today 400,000 Russian speakers, 100,000 Arabic speakers. That's 500,000 people out of 7 million. So that's about 8%. 8% means, in proportional representation terms, that out of 120 members of Knesset, the Christians should be getting 8 or 9 members of Knesset. So the first stage is that my party should get that, together with probably a few 100,000 Israeli Jewish people who could vote, and maybe some Muslims too. The next stage, and this is something we've been talking about so many times on your program, and that is that I believe there will be fanatic Islamic terrorism on American soil and in other countries. And we will see Jews and their Christian spouses faced with the choice of fleeing to Israel or staying here and risking death at the hands of terrorists who are cataloging Jews and their Christian spouses for annihilation. And I believe, unfortunately, that there will be more 9/11 attacks on American soil. That's why President Trump is so correct about having a wall up. And, it's interesting, Ezekiel 38 says that the Ezekiel war will happen when the gates are open and the walls are down. That's not Israel.
Wow.
That's America. Because in Israel, our walls are up, our gates are open, and people are flooding this country. Terrorists are flooding this country, and the U.S. government really cannot do anything about it. So that's America. Israel, the walls are up, gates are locked, and we shoot at anything that moves. So Israel is not described here in Ezekiel 38. So my point is that Jewish people and many, many millions of Christians married to the Jews will be moving to Israel together. And that leads me to the heart, the essence of this program.
You're listening to Avi Lipkin. You're listening to the Jewish perspective from inside Israel, so to speak. And it's a perspective we need to hear. We may not totally understand what you're saying because culturally and geographically we are so different here. Our position is so different. That's why I like to hear you talk, because you're speaking, as it were, from inside Israel and giving us a viewpoint. Now, having said that, there's another election coming up. There is a lot of rumbling in the Middle East. Where are we going from here? What do you predict in the near future for Israel?
Okay, well, we have to divide that into two. In other words, obviously, the elections, which are coming up. On the other side is the threat of a regional war. We've always been facing this threat of regional war with Iran. Ever since Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the Shah of Iran in 1979. We've been talking about a war with Iran.
But the Iranians are really getting serious right now, or
Correct.
So the news media tell us.
Correct. Now, President Trump, and forgive me for saying it, I think he's the best president America ever had. And I know a lot of people are going to shut the TV off now. But President Trump is like somebody who is on the ground floor and somebody up on the 120th floor throws this rock from the top of the building, and President Trump has to catch it. And so I say President Obama was the guy who threw the rock, and President Trump has to pick up the pieces and fix everything. And he's doing a marvelous job with the economy and all these things which you already know.
I should quickly point out that these are Avi's viewpoints.
These are Avi Lipkin's personal viewpoints. And as you know, President Trump, and there's no debate about it, opened the American embassy in Jerusalem, which is something many presidents promised to do, and they did not do it. President Trump has done many things for Israel, which no other president will do. Our alliance with the United States is stronger than ever, and our fellowship between Israel and the United States is stronger than ever. I think that the noose is tightening around the neck of the Iranians, and I think the tighter the noose, the more they're going to employ their proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza. Maybe the Bashar al-Assad regime, maybe not, because I think the Russians have a way of cooling down the Syrians from doing something really dumb. The Shiite militias in Iraq, we are facing, Iran is going to fight Israel to the last drop of its proxy's blood. But at some stage, I think that we will see an offensive against Iran, because the key here now is not so much Israel. The key is much more Saudi Arabia, the oil wells, the Straits of Hormuz, the free flow of oil to the economies of the world. You might say in a way this is globalist thinking. Yes, the globalists' God is Mammon, and in their own way of thinking, they are completely right, because if the oil is blocked by Iran, it is the end of the world economy. Oil goes up to $300 a barrel, and the world economy collapses, and billions of people die from starvation, sickness, and chaos. So number one is, I don't know if and when there will be a war, but Trump is our ally. But still, we've got people who think that America can be destroyed. America's the great Satan, and Islam has its foot soldiers here. Islam is also sending millions of immigrants into this country. That's going to lead, I believe, to a showdown in America, which will lead to Jews and Christians fleeing from America to Israel, which will be the only safe place in the world. And then, of course, we have to talk about the party and the elections.
You're listening to Avi Lipkin, and I have a question now. I'm kind of listening to you give us a broad view, but I'd like to narrow it down to the Israeli government. I think everybody, and Christians in particular, love the prime minister.
Correct. I do too.
He's very likable, very intelligent man. Israel's prime minister, however, is on shaky ground right now.
Correct.
And where's that going to take us?
Okay. This is a question which I cannot answer. As an Israeli army spokesman, the golden rule of every Israeli army spokesman is, in the Middle East, you learn to expect the unexpected. Now, to form a government in Israel, prime minister has to have at least 61 out of 120 members of Knesset elected freely in the elections. And what happened is that the party of Avigdor Lieberman, which was supposed to join Netanyahu's government, refused to, and so the balance was 60-60. And Netanyahu cannot form a government with 60-60, so we have to go to new elections. At the same time, there were two parties that did not overcome the threshold of 145,000 votes. And so we're talking about basically about 240,000 votes that went down the drain. And so that's the party of Moshe Feiglin and Naftali Bennett. Now, of course, a lot of your people don't know the names, but these are right-wing conservative people. Had they had a few more votes, they would have given Netanyahu enough mandates to get in.
Is Israel drifting leftward?
Okay, that's another question which is very, very malleable. You can look at different ways. What is leftist? And Netanyahu actually said that Avigdor Lieberman is really a leftist because he keeps torpedoing right-wing governments. Now, Avigdor Lieberman's contention was that Netanyahu is so sold out to the ultra-Orthodox religious parties in Israel that he is actually handcuffed by the ultra-Orthodox and leading Israel into a theocratic state. We call it a state of halakha. Halakha is the religious law, Jewish religious law, and the ultra-Orthodox are now more, or were at least, more in a position to extort their demands from the government, which is not ultra-Orthodox. In other words, the ultra-Orthodox are about 15 to 20% of the population. Arabs are 20% of the population. Secular people are about 20% of the population. And modern Orthodox and traditional Jews are about 40% of the population. So these people don't want an ultra-Orthodox fanatic state, but that's where it's going. So some people say left-wing means anti-ultra-Orthodox, even though people are Orthodox. And I wanted to share something, and I hope God forgives me, because, you remember the story about Joseph, that he was telling his father that his brothers were speaking bad about the land. And we see this also with Moses, where he sent the spies, and the two came back, Joseph and Caleb, and were saying that the other 10 spies were talking bad about the land. And I'm going to talk bad about the land now in the hope that this can help to save the country. And one of the purposes of my party, the Judeo-Christian Bible Bloc Party, is to save the country from the ultra-Orthodox, which would make me a leftist. But I'm not a leftist. I'm right-wing.
And I think we would all be very interested in hearing why you would like to save your country from the ultra-Orthodox.
Correct. Now, I have a great contamination in my life, and that is I'm an American. I was born in America. I was raised in America. I was raised in the American educational system. I was taught about democracy. Whether Democrat or Republican, American democracy, the greatness of American democracy, which is the flower of 2,000 years of progress of Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy. And, I would say to all of your viewers, for example, that if you look at countries like England, or at least what was England once, or America, or what was America once, or Canada, or Australia, or New Zealand, the Anglo countries, the Western European countries, what makes them great is Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy. Now, Israel is a country in which we don't have too many Jewish people from the West. The vast majority of our population, half comes from Islamic countries where there was never democracy, and half comes from Soviet socialist countries where there was never democracy.
Right.
And what I'm trying to do is create a new party, or I have created the party, now we're contending in the elections, because the Christians have absolutely zero representation in our government, in our Knesset. And you remember, in the American Revolution, no taxation without representation. And so that's why there was a revolt against England.
Right.
And today, if the Christians are 8% of the population and their Jewish spouses are 6%, that's 14%. We should have 14, 15, 16 members of Knesset at this time. When 10 million Jews and Christians flee from America to go to Israel, we will be the biggest party in the Knesset. That's what the rabbis are afraid of.
And that's the Avi Lipkin view of the near future, I
Correct.
suppose. This is the way you see things, through the eyes of someone who's been involved with the Israeli government, with the Israeli military, with Israeli thinking.
Correct.
And your way of thinking and expressing is entirely different, I think, than most Americans would consider normal. However, and that's why you're here, I would like to hear you really expound deeply on your ideas of where we're going, because we all want to, I think, tune in to ways of thinking that are not normal to us.
Correct. I used to belong to an international Jewish Zionist youth movement called Beitar, B-E-T-A-R. People can look it up. Our ideological mentor was Zev Vladimir Jabotinsky. Now, I know for American Christians, like, this is from the moon, Jabotinsky was the mentor of Menachem Begin. He was the mentor of Netanyahu, and he was my mentor too. And actually, Jabotinsky was a liberal in the sense of 1900s liberal or 1800s liberal,
yes,
from Odessa, Russia, before the revolution.
Classic liberal.
Classic liberal, laissez-faire capitalism,
right,
but not capitalism that would take advantage of the people, but capitalism that would bless the people, like provide a welfare state, but capitalism. And also, we believed in a strong Israel, strong military state, and so I was always considered by the leftists, by the socialists, as a nationalist. And I am a nationalist. But what happened over the decades, I've been speaking in churches 30 years. And what has happened is my nationalism now embraces the Christians, because I embrace Western civilization and democracy. And the Christians have the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Christians have the same Old Testament as the Jews. I mean, Jews have the Talmud, Christians have the New Testament, but the Old Testament is there for both of us. And Messiah is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. So for the Christians, that's Jesus Christ. Wonderful. We Jews don't know who the Messiah is. We will know when he's on the Mount of Olives. And I'm predicting that we will know the Messiah very soon when all these things come to pass with the Islamic terrorism and the wars. And we are in a difficult time now in front of us.
And you said something very interesting, soon. You used the word soon.
Correct.
You have that feeling.
Yes.
And I use the word because feeling is so subjective.
Right.
And I don't want you to be subjective in your views, rather objective, but you have a sense that we're drawing to some kind of a close.
Yes. You know the song, Mañana, Mañana, Mañana is good enough for me. Mañana could be tomorrow. It could be next week, next month, next year, maybe even next decade. But what I see happening is I do see an attack on America by Islamic terrorism. You have to remember, America is the great Christian Satan. Israel is the little Satan. The way to destroy Israel is to destroy the great Christian Satan, America, then Israel is all alone. And one of the important points, even under Obama, the Israeli military marched in lockstep with the American military. Yeah. That had nothing to do with politics. We have a very good relationship with the American military. The problem today is that if these terrorists come to attack America, or they're here already, and they try to attack America, and then there is complete chaos, American law enforcement will not be capable, will not be able to defend every individual Jew and Christian spouses and children. So there is going to be a slaughter. I'm predicting a terrible, tremendous slaughter of Jews and Christians in American soil. And maybe that's the only way God can get Jews to get up and leave America, because Jews are so happy here, like they were happy in Germany in the 30s. And they didn't want to leave Germany, and they got killed. And so instead of the Nazis, it's going to be Islam.
Pulling no punches, Avi Lipkin. And I should say that he speaks fluent Spanish after that rendition of Mañana.
Yeah.
And you do. You get around.
I speak in Spanish churches too.
And
the only problem is they laugh because I have an Argentine accent, which sounds like Italian.
And so, moving right along, what I wanted to say is that I value your perspective because it is so radically different from the American perspective. And I think we need to hear your perspective and sort of integrate it with the way we're thinking right now. In America, there are a lot of people who can't imagine where we're going.
Right.
They sense that something is off balance and a little bit wrong. Christians, I think, are a walking question mark at this point. And that's why I enjoy hearing you, because you have a radically different perspective.
Yes. What I wanted to do now, with your permission, because I'm watching the clock also, and I want to squeeze this in because this is really the key to the whole message today. I was born in America, as I said. My parents grew up in Roman Catholic Argentina. My parents were Jewish, but they grew up as the only Jews in their respective neighborhoods. And they grew up pretty much like their Catholic neighbors. And by the way, Argentina has no anti-Semitism. The Catholics there are happy-go-lucky. There's no such thing as anti-Semitism. Brazil, no anti-Semitism. And when they came to America, because my parents grew up poor as immigrants in Argentina from my grandparents, they said, we are going to send our son Avi to Hebrew school in New York. And there were 3 synagogues in our town, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. And to the people watching this show, I have to explain slightly the differences. Okay, now Orthodox is the traditional rabbinic Judaism with all the liturgies. Conservative is trying to conserve as much of these liturgies as possible. And then the Reform have gone and they've changed a lot of the liturgies and they've added new things and humanism and modernism and things which, Orthodox Jews don't like at all. But the biggest movement in America today is actually the Reform. Also, if Jews marry Christians, the conservative and the Orthodox will not allow that couple to be members in the synagogue. They have to go to the Reform. And the Reform accepts non-Jewish spouses. And there are actually many Reform synagogues where the majority of the people in the board of education of that synagogue are not Jewish, they're Christian. So there's a lot of fellowship and cooperation, but the liturgy is not the same, really. And a lot of liturgy is in English. Okay, Orthodox are strict about praying only in Hebrew. It's kind of like it harkens back to the Catholic Church, where you could only pray in Latin. Okay, I would say liberally that the conservative movement today is kind of like, if Catholic is ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox, then conservative would be like Presbyterian. In other words, there has been a Protestant Reformation, and there has been a change in Christianity, and you have the Gutenberg Press, and all of a sudden, these Protestants are now following what the Bible says, not what the priest says. Okay? In ultra-Orthodox Judaism, you follow what the rabbis say. You don't go out on your own and do whatever you want. Now, I was raised in a conservative synagogue. I became a Zionist in a conservative synagogue, and I made Aliyah and moved to Israel as a conservative Jew. And actually, I'm very close to the modern Orthodox. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I'm very much a conservative Jew because conservative Jews believe men and women should sit together while praying. So the Orthodox say, oh, you're contaminated by the Christians where men and women sit together. And I say, no, you're contaminated by the Muslims where you segregate the sexes. I don't believe in segregation of the sexes. If a man has a problem sitting next to a woman, he should go to a psychiatrist. That's my approach.
Okay.
So you can tell I'm not Orthodox.
All right.
Regarding the liturgy, a lot of the sacrifices from the temple times have been taken out of the conservative liturgy because there is no temple. It's not relevant anymore. The Orthodox keep it because the Orthodox are saying, well, maybe the temple will come back one day. So, okay. So now here comes the really tough part of this message. I moved to Israel, and I grew up in conservative. I go to the Orthodox synagogues. I didn't like it because it was so fast, and it was just in Hebrew, and there was no singing the way I liked it. And I dropped out of religion for 20 years. Then when my sons had their bar mitzvahs, there were conservative synagogues in Israel, and I felt at home. So I came back to the religion according to the conservative way. Some people want to be Jewish, but they want to be Orthodox. They want to be conservative or Reform. Okay, that's easy. When my wife and I built our house in the town where we live, in Kedar, and I told them, I want an Ashkenazi synagogue. I didn't say Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. I said, I want an Ashkenazi synagogue. The word got out in Kedar, and this you're going to laugh when you hear this. Avi Lipkin is a Christian, Messianic, Reform, Conservative Jew. Now, how can you lump all these things together? Only one way, and that's through ignorance. Yes. And the rabbi there was a fanatic, ultra-Orthodox rabbi. He hates Christians, hates Messianics, hates Reform Jews, hates conservative Jews. He hates the modern Orthodox Kippah Jews, and he hates Ashkenazi Jews because he's Sephardic. That rabbi was I don't want to say rest in peace. He died at 55. He was a smoker. He was heavyset. I said, stop smoking. I said to him, you're killing yourself. He continued smoking. He dropped dead one night. And I mourned for him because he was very brilliant in his own way. He went to yeshiva. That's how he was trained in yeshiva. What's happening today in Israel is that from 500 military exemptions of yeshiva students in 1949, we've gone now to 125,000 exemptions for yeshiva students. And these people are being taught to hate Christians, hate Messianics, hate Reform Jews, hate conservative Jews, and they're becoming more and more extreme. And now, even yesterday, they were talking about separation of the sexes in public gatherings. What is this? Are we going back to Iran of Khomeini? This is the direction the rabbis, the ultra-Orthodox rabbis, want to go in. And there are rabbis, I don't want to mention their names, who are good guys, in my opinion. They're being viciously attacked by the fanatic rabbis who are saying these rabbis are too liberal, they're not true rabbis. And I wanted to say one more thing, because again, the time is getting very short.
Keep going. We'll make time.
Okay. 2 weeks ago, there was a book review of a book written by the chief Sephardic rabbi, Yitzchak Yosef, the son of Ovadia Yosef, the famous Ovadia Yosef.
Oh, yes.
And he said, anyone who enters a Reformed temple is committing idolatry. Now, of course, in the Talmud, it says churches are idolatry. Now, Reformed synagogues are idolatry. And that Reformed Jews, if they go into an Orthodox synagogue, they should not be allowed to go up to the Torah. The bottom line of this is that the ultra-Orthodox are seeking to expel the Christians from Israel, expel the Messianics from Israel, expel the Reform and not let them in with their Christian spouses, expel the conservative Jews. They hate these modern Orthodox Jews, and our group is actually a lot smaller than the ultra-Orthodox. In other words, this is going to become a fanatic, theocratic state. And because I believe 10 million Jews and Christians are actually going to move to Israel, and my party is going to be the biggest party, the ultra-Orthodox want to cut me off at the pass and make sure that 9 million Jews and Christians stay here, stuck here, ready for death at the hands of Islamic terrorists, while only 1 million Orthodox Jews are allowed in.
Now, you've been saying for years that the Islamics have a plan and a program for America.
Right.
Very quietly in the background.
Right.
We've watched it. We've listened to you. We see it now beginning to
materialize.
Materialize, edge its way into the open. So you've been right.
Unfortunately. And many times when you're in an argument, you say, I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. But I see everything coming to pass as God has revealed it, not only to me, more importantly to my wife, because my wife says to me, this is what they're doing. My wife is from Egypt. And we've spoken about this in 25 years that I've been working with you guys. My wife was an intelligence gatherer, and they say exactly what they're going to do. And they're going to kill the Jews on Saturday, they're going to kill the Christians on Sunday, and everybody's in La La Land. And the Christians, I say Christians are asleep. Sleep is okay, because if you're asleep, I kick you, pinch you, slap you, you wake up. The Jews are not asleep, the Jews are comatose.
And so all of this is happening
right now,
in your opinion, right now, and in a way that's inexorable.
Right.
You really can't turn it around. That's what you're telling me.
Right. By the way, in this book, Islamic Threat Updates, which I wrote in 1999, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I spoke about the Edmonton Revelation in Canada, where I was told very clearly by a lady who was a social worker for the government of Canada, not Jewish, working with the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, that in their opinion, 90% of the Muslims are peacekeeping, law-abiding citizens, but 10% are terrorists paid for by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these countries in the Middle East. And their plan is to catalog the Jews, catalog the Christian spouses, catalog the pastors and Messianic groups that love Israel, and then kill them when a war breaks out in the Middle East. And I think that war is the war with Iran.
And by the way, if you'd like to help Avi, with his work in founding the Bible Block Party in Israel, we have these books, 7 books, and by the way, if you purchase these from our online bookstore, we have 2 free DVDs to go with it. One on Donald Trump, it's called The Trump Revolution, and one explaining the Bible Block Party. But in closing, let's just talk about your 7 books. Just reprise what they're about, why you wrote them, and then I'm afraid we're out of time.
Yeah. Well, very simply, this is 70 years of my life, 30 years of which I've been traveling around the United States and around the world, receiving information. And when God gives me information, God says, you have to put this in a book form, because Ezekiel 33, verse 6, if the watchman on the tower sees the sword coming, and the watchman on the tower does not warn the people behind the walls of the city, they die in their iniquity, but their blood will be required at the hands of the watchman. I don't want your blood on my hands. And I feel God has given me a long life until now to keep the message going out. and there is no retirement when you're serving the Lord.
Amen. I'm Gary Stearman. You keep watching. We are.
Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.